When Jesus comes to Caesarea Philippi, he asks the disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And it's important to realize that though the answer they gave toward what the public thought wasn't actually an accurate answer to who Jesus is, it was still pretty complimentary. To say that he's John the Baptist was to claim that he is kind of the reincarnate great prophet that they had been longing for 400 years of silence. To say that he's Elijah is to make him one of the greatest ever. Jeremiah was the prophet by which they held their hope when they were in the captivity and became a loved prophet of the people, though he was despised while he was alive. And so they're saying that he had a high role. They saw that he was something beyond just a teacher. Even reminds us in John 3, Nicodemus early comes to Jesus and says, hey, we know that you're a great prophet. And so it seems to be these are kind of the answers that Jesus is receiving, but Jesus turns it then to them and makes it much more personal. Who do you say that I am? And Peter's answer we could easily just gloss over and go, wow, that turns into a creed. In fact, some have denied its originality by saying, well, it sounds too much like a creed. But we see that the answer doesn't come from Peter, so we shouldn't be surprised that it doesn't sound like Peter always sounds. But Peter answers him, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. What is Peter saying? He's saying you are the Messiah. That's what Christ means. You are the chosen one of God. You are the one that has been set apart before the foundations of the earth to come. You are the Son. To understand the Son means that he is attributing deity to Jesus, that to be the Son of God is to be a member of the Godhead. And so he is affirming Jesus' deity by saying that. And then of the living God. This is understood even from interactions that Jesus has had with the disciples previously, that to believe that he is the Son of the living God means that you are affirming the truth of the resurrection, that God the Father is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, they must have been resurrected. There must be life after death because he is not the God of the dead. He is the God of the living. Peter gives this great statement which is full of doctrinal truth. It is the gospel that it lays out, that Jesus would be the chosen one who comes to be able to offer life on our behalf for us by being the one who would be the propitiation, would be the one who would take away our sins. Jesus says that Peter nailed it, but he doesn't give Peter the credit for it. He says, you're right. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. But then he says, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Peter gives his proclamation, not because Peter's smart, not because Peter's figured it out, not because Peter's got all his ducks in a row, not because Peter's quicker than the other disciples. Peter gets it right because God revealed that answer to him. And then Jesus says something else to him that we can quickly miss. He says, you're Simon Bar-Jonah. That's the name you've been given. But he then says to him in verse 18, but I say to you that you are Peter. And what he's doing there is he's doing a play on words. Actually, Caesarea Philippi is a very rocky area. There would have been boulders and rocks and giant, stones all around them. And he says, you are Peter. That's the word for just like a little pebble. But I tell you, on this rock, and that's a word for a foundation stone, a large, immovable stone you can build a house upon this rock, I will build my church. And the gates of Hades will not overpower it. And so what that tells us is a couple things here. One is Peter can't be the rock. There are those who erroneously teach that Peter became the first pope, despite the fact that most of Peter's ministry wasn't even in Rome, so that makes it very tough. But not only that, but Jesus intentionally uses similar words, but yet different words to say, you're a little stone, but on this major rock, I will build my church. And what is that rock? It is Peter's confession. It is the gospel. So the foundation stone that Jesus is going to build his church on is the gospel. But the second thing we see about this is it's not upon this rock you will build my church. It is upon this rock I will build my church. And so Peter becomes one of the ones who is going to proclaim that gospel, understanding it far better after the resurrection than he even understands it in this confession. But Jesus says, I'm going to build my gospel, build my church. Jesus is about the business of building his own church. And what's that church going to be able to do? It's going to be able to storm the gates of hell. The gates of Hades will not be able to overpower it. The gospel will have this power that can go into that place which is death and sin and free people from that captivity. You, me, we were a slave to sin. We were held captive by its power, and yet the gospel and its proclamation is so strong that Christ is able to use that message to come in and free us from there and have us escape from the gates of hell to be in his presence. And so in this passage, we see Peter nails the gospel, and Jesus says, well, you don't even just understand who I am and what I'm going to do. You don't understand the full measure of it. With what I'm going to do on Calvary, I'm going to use that to establish my church for my glory.